How's it going, YouTube? Coming today with another video, and today, guys, what the video is going to be a deep dive into card text, PSET, better known as problem-solving card text, and this is really important. You can win a ton of games if you just understand how cards work at a basic level. Now, there's nothing basic about PSET and Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's a lot to look into with it. There's a lot of very minute interactions, and there's a lot of things that you have to remember. So I'm going to be breaking down most instances of PSET and where it becomes very relevant into today's game. So I do hope this helps you improve at the game. I hope this helps you look at the game in a different light, because a lot of the ways that you can utilize cards really depends on how it's worded. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on RAW, Cloud, Gem, Arla, Imperium, Dragonshield, and Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we were trying to hit 30,000 by the end of the year. I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much for the support so far. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and here's a quick look at today's sponsor. Hey all, so you've definitely seen Arla on my channel lately, and I love board games, and I was overly thrilled when they came to me about their new game. This is something made by Duelists for Duelists, and I just love the fact that you have such diverse movement in a board game of all things, right? It just is a really cool addition and element to the game. You have a ton of different roles to choose from, and I really love the Wizard because it gives you additional RNG as far as getting to cards that you really need to progress in the game. It's really cool, and as an English major, I just love the very first line here. Just a once peaceful kingdom has now fallen into chaos for the first time in 1,000 years. And, you know, this is going to be your own role to start your own journey to try to get things back in order. And, you know, the only question I have for you now is, are you ready to play Monster Cash Race? Now, the first situation of PSET that I want to look at is use versus activate. Now, this is really important. So, if you attempt to use the effect of Murakumo to be able to reborn itself, and let's say the effect got like Solemn Strike, right? You attempted to use the effect. So if we look at the bottom here, it's you can only use each effect once per turn. So therefore, if you use Murakumo and it gets stopped by something like Solemn Strike, you already attempted to use the effect. Whereas, like, Triple Tactics Talent says you can only activate one Triple Tactics Talent per turn. So, if you activate Talent, and this is back when it was at 3, right? Obviously, you can't do this anymore because it's at 1. This is just an example. But, if you have Triple Tactics Talent, you use it, and your opponent flips Solemn Judgment, the activation is now negated. So, therefore, let's say that you have like the magical stone of excavation and you add it back, right? And then you go activate talent. It is still a legal target because the card never activated. So therefore you can activate another one. This is the same thing with like the Prime Planet Perlerino, right? You can only activate one once per turn. So if they like Baron negate, obviously this is like a master rule thing at this point, right? But you can still activate another one because you can only activate once per turn, which is fantastic, and it's something that you should really know. That's why I usually really like playing as boards with like omnis that negate activations, because back when like talent was at multiple, I was like, sick, they negate the first one, you slap the second one, right? And you're like, that's just game. So it's pretty cool. And the other thing about this that you really should know is there's a difference between once per turn and you can only use. So let's say Boral Savage Dragon and Dragoon. If you talent take a Dragoon that has already used this effect to negate, you cannot use the effect to negate because the card itself is once per turn on the board. It just says once per turn negate. Boral Savage, let's say that your opponent used an effect of Boral Savage to negate, and it still has counters on it, and you talent take the Boral Savage. The card says you can only use, you have not used Boral Savage, your opponent has. So if they activate something, you can now use the Boral Savage because it's you as the player can only use this once per turn. So now you get the effect of the Boral Savage, and your opponents already have the effect of Boral Savage. Now neither of you can use it because you've both already used it. So this is where the text of cards are very important, because if you didn't know that, let's say that your opponent had like a nib when you're comboing and you already have the Boral Savage, and you're like, yeah, my board's wiped. Like, you lost the game. But now you know that you can use the Savage that you steal because that effect is only you can use, right? So that's pretty cool to know. So this is kind of like a tag along slide to the last one, just kind of talking about negating effect versus negating activation. So if you have something like Ash Blossom, this will negate the effect, where a Solemn Judgment would negate the activation. So let's say that your opponent goes talent to draw 2, and you Ash it, they've already activated the card, so they can't attempt to activate it again. Whereas if you Judgment it, they can go ahead and try to activate the card again. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind too. Let's talk about resolving as much as possible. So this is something that you really gotta know as well. Card text is just as important as knowing how to resolve a card. So, Allure of Darkness, a very powerful card back in Phantom Darkness that was just absolutely phenomenal. The card got hit pretty quick, and now we have it back in the game. It has been in and out of formats. But how does a card like this interact with something like Lancia? So, if you're already under Lancia, you cannot attempt to use Allure of Darkness, as this is an effect that would banish. But let's say you made it to main phase 1, your opponent doesn't drop Lancia. This happens quite often right now. You activate Allure of Darkness, your opponent chains Lancia. How would this resolve? Well, chain links work backward, so Lancia resolves. The Allure of Darkness will attempt to draw 2 cards, so you'll draw your 2, and then banish 1 dark monster from your hand. Well, you can't do that, but you have to prove that there was a dark monster in your hand, so you will just go ahead and reveal a dark monster in your hand, but you don't have to banish anything because you cannot banish anything. So this is the same thing with like Rhino Heart that I bring up in a lot of my videos, where the card itself will summon and then send. So if you had a legal target to send in your hand when you activated the Rhino, then you summon the Rhino, and by the time you summon Rhino, you don't have a legal target to send. It resolved as much as possible to summon itself, and now there's nothing to discard. So your cards will always resolve as much as they can as long as they were legally activated. So drawing 2 cards is a very legal thing to do if they chain Lancia, but you just have to reveal a dark monster, and that's the end of the effect. Now for the idea of paying cost. This is the difference between a colon and a semicolon. A colon means activate. A semicolon means cost. Cost can always be paid unless there's a situation that is already affecting the game state. Let's say that you're trying to use an effect like a Veiler, and you're under Dimension Shifter. Veiler sends to graveyard for cost. You can no longer attempt to activate a Veiler because the cost cannot be paid because there's not a location that it's allowed to go to. But the effect of Dante, for example, let's say that you were under Skill Drain, and then you go, I'm going to activate the effect of Dante. I'm going to pay my cost. You would still be able to detach 1 from Dante and mill 3 because milling 3 is the cost of the card. So just to try to activate the card, you have to pay the cost for it. It will resolve negated, but the card itself is allowed to pay the cost. So even if you go ahead and use Dante and they chain Veiler, the cost is still going to be sent because that's the first thing that has to happen is you have to go ahead and detach 1, then mill 3, and then the card will resolve negated. But that's what's really cool about the cost is because you're allowed to just go ahead and do that even if the card is already negated. So very cool thing to know. The other thing is cards like Imperial Order. You are paying 700. That does not count for things like card burn damage. So things like Prime Material wouldn't go off, right? Your Imperial Order is just saying pay 700. Like you have to, right? So that's one thing where it's like it says on the card, it's not optional. You just have to pay 700. That does not count as an activation or like a card effect or something. It is just going to be something that you do. It is the cost of the card. Now we're going to the also phase of this. So this is what's really important when it comes to negating an effect. So let's just read the entire effect of Pot of Prosperity. Banish 3 or 6 cards of your choice from your extra deck face down. For the rest of this turn after the card resolves, that's a really important part. After this card resolves, any damage your opponent takes is halved. Also, Excavate cards on top of your deck equal to the number of cards banished. Add one excavated card to your hand. Place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. You can only activate one Pot of Prosperity per turn. You cannot draw cards by card effects the turn you activate this card. So now let's look at a couple key things here. The cost is to banish cards, right? That's fine. That is the cost of the card. To attempt to activate it, you have to be able to banish 3 or 6 cards. Now, after this card resolves, that doesn't refer to the activation. That just refers to the effect of the card. The next part here is going to be really important. It's also. So you take the first half of the card and the second half of the card. In between is also. Both of those things are in tandem. They're together. So if the entire effect gets stopped, both parts of also will also get stopped. So that's going to be really important. This is a big question that I see all the time is what happens if you ash Pot of Prosperity? What can you still do? What can you not do? So if Pot of Prosperity gets ashed, since the also affects both parts of the card at the first part of it, it says for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, any damage your opponent takes is halved. Also, excavate and add. So since you're ashed, you will not excavate and add, and your opponent will take full damage because you're negating the effect of the card. Now, what can you not do? You cannot draw cards by card effects the turn you activate this card. So since you're negating the effect and not the activation, you still cannot draw cards by card effects for the rest of the turn because the activation of the card was not negated. So your opponent still takes full damage, but you can't draw. Now, both versus them. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm still going to explain it just to make sure that you know. So, Expulsion. Tribute 1 fusion monster, target 2 non-fusion monsters that are banished or in the graveyard. Special summon both monsters. This really pertains to summoning both monsters. You have to do that. If you cannot summon both monsters, the card resolves without effect. Promethean Princess, though, just says destroy them. So, what's important about destroying them is it resolves as much as possible. And this is what we were talking about earlier. Target a fire monster you control, a monster your opponent controls. Destroy them. If you do, special summon this card. So, you're just going to be resolving as much as possible. You are destroying the targets. If one is moved, then you're still resolving. You're still at least destroying one. If both are removed and they're not destroyed, the card will resolve without effect. So as long as it destroys one card, it will keep resolving as much as possible. If it doesn't destroy either, the effect stops there. You have to do A, then B. So if it doesn't destroy anything, the card just won't resolve. But if it destroys at least one, it'll still reborn itself. Now this next part is just about droplet. And this is really important as we're seeing droplet again, and this is something that you really want to keep in mind. Now, this card specifically says, send any number of other cards from your hand or field to the graveyard, cost, choose that many effect monsters your opponent controls, and until the end of this turn, their attack is halved. Also, their effects are negated. So, what's really important about this is, so I'm just going to say this and I'm going to explain this. If you send 3 monsters, because your opponent has 3 monsters, and your opponent gets rid of one of their monsters, and you sent 3, and now they control 2, droplet will resolve without effect. So, at activation, you have to send as many cards as you want to negate off their board. So, it only goes after monsters, right? If your opponent can get underneath the number that you sent, your droplet will resolve without effect. This is a really popular example back in Sword Soul format where your opponent would have Blackout, Chi-Shao, and Baron. So you would activate droplet and send like a monster and a spell. Usually never a trap because it's just not really going to be that optimal. If you like hard open Imperium, you probably already used it, right? So very niche situation where you'd actually have a trap to send. But in most scenarios, it's going to be like a monster and a spell, right? So you go activate droplet, my cost is 2 cards. Your opponent goes activate blackout. Blackout will tribute like the Chi-Shao and blow up 2 other cards, right? So now all you have on board at resolution is Baron. So now we keep resolving, we go back to droplet. Your opponent sent 2 cards. You no longer control 2 monsters, you only have 1. Droplet will not resolve at all, because your opponent chose for 2 cards to get negated. There's only 1, and since you want to negate 2, you're kind of out of luck. So that's how droplet works, and it's all about the card text. You send as many as you want, but you have to also be able to negate that many cards. So that's really important going forward. Let's say that you have like Detonator Mirakumo, and your opponent wants to go ahead and droplet you, and they didn't send a spell. You could just like prayers get rid of Mirakumo, and now the droplet just doesn't resolve. I hope this video is educational for you. This is something that I always want to be able to do, is just kind of have like a fireside chat and talk to you about things that are really important in the game and things that can really help you win games too. But if you haven't already checked out my Twitter, Twitch, Discord, Instagram, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, definitely go and do so. We're trying to hit 30,000 by the end of the year, and I can't wait to hit that goal. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.